Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are exploring a Bible that most people have never seen, yet it has been read and preserved for over 1,000 years. It is known as the Ethiopian Bible, maintained by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. This Bible contains more books than the versions used in the West, and it has been passed down continuously, not rediscovered or reconstructed. It exists outside the traditions shaped by Europe and Rome, and because of that, it presents a broader and sometimes unfamiliar picture of biblical history as we explore its origins, where it is kept, who guards it, and what it contains. Something becomes clear. This Bible invites us to see Jesus in a different light, not through doctrine or debate, but through an older and uninterrupted tradition. Let's begin with where this Bible came from. The story of the Ethiopian Bible begins in East Africa, long before Christianity became dominant in Europe. By the early 4th century, Christianity had already taken root in the ancient kingdom of Aksum, a powerful civilization located in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. Aksum was not isolated from the ancient world. It traded with Rome, Arabia, Egypt, and India. Ideas, languages, and beliefs moved along these routes. When Christianity arrived, it did not enter a cultural vacuum. It entered a society with deep traditions, strong royal authority, and a long memory of sacred law. According to tradition, Christianity became the official religion of Aksum in the 4th century during the reign of King Ezana. From that point forward, biblical texts began to be translated into Ge'ez, the sacred language of Ethiopia. Ge'ez was not a spoken street language. It was a formal, literary language used for worship, law, and royal records. That choice mattered. It meant the Bible was treated as something sacred from the beginning, not casual or disposable. Unlike later European Bibles, the Ethiopian Bible did not emerge from printing presses or centralized editorial projects. It was built slowly. Texts were copied by hand, generation after generation, by scribes who saw their work as an act of devotion. Mistakes were corrected through comparison and memory. Authority came from continuity, not from councils or decrees. Equally important is what did not happen. Ethiopia was geographically distant from the political and religious struggles that later reshaped Christianity elsewhere. It was not pulled into debates that led to books being excluded or reorganized. As a result, the Ethiopian Bible preserved a wider collection of writings simply because no one ever told Ethiopia to remove them. This is why the Ethiopian Bible feels different today. It was not assembled in reaction to controversy. It was not edited to settle arguments. It grew naturally within a living community of worship. In simple terms, the Ethiopian Bible exists because Christianity arrived early, took root deeply, and continued without interruption. It is not a revised version of another Bible. It is a direct continuation of an ancient Christian world that never disappeared. Unlike most famous religious texts, the Ethiopian Bible does not exist as a single, official volume stored in one central location. There is no master copy sealed in a vault. Instead, it survives as a network of manuscripts, spread across Ethiopia, quietly protected within churches and monasteries that have existed for centuries. Many of the oldest copies are kept in remote monastic communities, some located high in the mountains, others carved into rock or hidden behind thick stone walls. These places were never designed for visitors. They were built for prayer, isolation, and preservation. In these settings, manuscripts were less exposed to war, political change, or large-scale destruction. One of the most important locations associated with Ethiopia's biblical tradition is Aksum, the former capital of the Aksumite kingdom. Aksum remains a spiritual center of the Ethiopian Orthodox world. Ancient churches there still guard manuscripts that are considered sacred objects. Not historical artifacts, they are not displayed behind glass. They are used. The manuscripts themselves are typically written on parchment, hand-bound, and often richly illustrated. Some contain the full biblical canon. Others preserve individual books or collections used for specific readings. Age varies widely. Some copies date back many centuries, while others are later reproductions made to replace worn originals. What matters is not the age of a single manuscript, but the continuity of copying and use. Access to these texts is tightly controlled. Most are not available to the public, and many have never been fully digitized. This is not secrecy for the sake of mystery. It is protection in Ethiopian tradition. The Bible is not an object of curiosity, it is a sacred presence. Because of this, the Ethiopian Bible was never centralized, cataloged, or standardized in the way Western texts were. It lived where worship lived, and as long as the monasteries remained standing, the Bible remained alive. The Ethiopian Bible is not owned by an individual, a government, or a single institution. It belongs to the community that has carried it for centuries. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the Bible is understood as a sacred trust rather than a possession. Its primary guardians are priests and monks. These are not archivists or librarians in the modern sense. They are custodians of memory. Many learn large portions of Scripture by heart. The texts are preserved not only in ink, but in chant, rhythm, and repetition. This living transmission has always been considered as important as the written manuscripts themselves. Monasteries play a central role. Each monastery functions as its own center of preservation, responsible for protecting the manuscripts in its care. Some monks dedicate their entire lives to copying texts, repairing damaged pages, or maintaining the physical conditions that allow parchment to survive. Knowledge of where certain manuscripts are kept is often passed down orally, from one generation to the next. There is no concept of private ownership. A manuscript is never sold. It cannot be removed at will. Even church leaders do not treat these texts as property. Access is granted only when it serves worship or instruction. This approach explains why many Ethiopian Bible manuscripts remain unknown outside the country. Authority does not come from control over a single original text. It comes from continuity. If a book has been read, copied, and prayed over for centuries, it is accepted as part of the Bible. That acceptance does not require external approval. In this system, the Bible survives not because it is locked away, but because it is constantly guarded by people who believe it is their responsibility to carry it forward intact. The Ethiopian Bible does not replace other Bibles, and it does not claim to correct them. It exists alongside them, following a parallel path that began early and continued without interruption. At its core, the Ethiopian Bible shares the same foundation found in other Christian traditions. The central narratives of creation, the prophets, the life of Jesus, the crucifixion, and the resurrection are all present. Much of what readers recognize from Hebrew and Greek-based Bibles is there. The difference lies not in contradiction, but in scope. While Western Bibles eventually settled on a fixed number of books, Ethiopia never narrowed its collection. Texts that circulated widely in the early centuries of Christianity continued to be read and copied, because Ethiopia was not drawn into later debates over which books should be excluded. Those writings simply remained. This is why the Ethiopian Bible often aligns closely with ancient Jewish and early Christian traditions that predate later standardization. In some cases, its texts resemble early Greek translations such as the Septuagint, rather than later Latin-based versions. In other cases, it preserves material that disappeared elsewhere but later resurfaced in fragmentary form among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Importantly, the Ethiopian Bible was not shaped in response to other canons. It did not expand to challenge them, nor did it contract to match them. It simply continued as it had begun. This makes comparison difficult in modern terms. The Ethiopian Bible is not an edited edition of another Bible. It is a record of what one ancient Christian world received and chose to keep. Understanding this relationship helps explain why the Ethiopian Bible can feel both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. It tells the same story, but with a longer memory. The Ethiopian Bible tells a broad, continuous story of the world, how it began, how it fell into disorder, and how it is guided back toward balance. Its focus is not abstract ideas, but actions, consequences, and responsibility. The narrative feels grounded, ancient, and direct. Much of the content will sound familiar. Creation, human failure, law, prophets, kings, exile, restoration. These themes form the backbone of the biblical story, just as they do elsewhere. What sets the Ethiopian Bible apart is how fully it preserves the world surrounding those events. One major emphasis is the unseen realm. Angels, messengers, and heavenly beings appear frequently, not as symbols, but as active participants in the story of humanity. Order and disorder are not only human problems, they are cosmic ones. Actions on earth echo beyond it. This wider view is especially clear in texts such as the Book of Enoch, which is fully preserved in the Ethiopian tradition. These writings describe journeys through heavenly spaces, warnings given to humanity, and the consequences of moral collapse. The tone is not speculative, it is cautionary. Humanity is portrayed as accountable within a structured universe governed by justice. Another recurring theme is covenant. The relationship between God and humanity is shown as continuous rather than fragmented. Laws, promises, and expectations do not reset with each generation. They accumulate. Memory matters, obedience matters, forgetting has consequences. The Ethiopian Bible also places strong emphasis on righteousness as lived behavior, not internal belief alone. Faith is shown through loyalty, discipline, and action. Characters are judged by what they do, not what they claim. Taken together, the Ethiopian Bible reads less like a philosophical system and more like a record of a long moral journey. It describes a world where heaven and earth remain closely connected, where history carries weight, and where human choices shape more than just individual outcomes. This broader narrative frame sets the stage for how the Ethiopian Bible presents its central figure, Jesus. In the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus is presented with clarity and authority. The portrait is not abstract, philosophical, or heavily debated. He appears as a real figure acting within a long and continuous sacred history. Jesus is first and foremost a teacher and a king. His words carry command, not speculation. He speaks as someone who already stands within divine authority rather than someone attempting to define it. The emphasis is less on explanation and more on obedience. What is said is meant to be followed. He is also shown as deeply connected to the earlier biblical world. The Ethiopian Bible places Jesus firmly within the line of prophets, covenants, and promises that came before him. He does not appear as a break from the past, but as its fulfillment. Law, prophecy, and judgment remain present. Nothing is erased, everything is completed. Another strong feature is scale. Jesus is not portrayed only as a local teacher speaking to a small audience. His actions are presented as having cosmic significance. His presence affects not only people, but the order of the world itself. Heaven, earth, and the unseen realm respond to him. This gives his life and death a sense of weight and inevitability. Suffering is described plainly. The crucifixion is not softened or stylized. It is presented as a moment of obedience and endurance rather than emotional drama. Resurrection follows not as surprise, but as confirmation. What was promised is shown to be true. The Ethiopian Bible also emphasizes Jesus as judge and restorer. Mercy is present, but it is structured. Forgiveness does not cancel responsibility. Instead, it restores order. This gives Jesus a commanding presence, compassionate, but never uncertain. Visually, Ethiopian Christian art reflects this understanding. Jesus is often shown front-facing, alert and authoritative. His eyes are open, his posture is upright. Even in scenes of suffering, there is restraint and control rather than chaos. Overall, the Ethiopian Bible presents Jesus as a figure of continuity, authority, and completion. He is not separated from the larger story of the world. He stands at its center. The Ethiopian Bible is not a mystery because it was hidden. It is a mystery because it was never looking for attention. While other traditions were shaped by councils, empires, and later reforms, Ethiopia continued reading, copying, and preserving its scriptures as it always had. What survives today is not a single book, but a continuous memory. The Ethiopian Bible exists because generations believed it was their responsibility to protect what they had received, not to reshape it. It was guarded in monasteries, carried in chant and ritual, and treated as a living presence rather than a historical object. Exploring this Bible does not require theological arguments or academic debate. Its significance lies in what it represents. A Christian tradition that developed early, remained stable, and never broke from its original path. It reminds us that the history of Christianity is wider than the story most people know. Through the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus appears not as a figure defined by later interpretation, but as one rooted deeply in an ancient and uninterrupted world. He is shown as teacher, king, judge, and restorer, connected to what came before and central to what follows. This does not replace other Bibles, nor does it challenge them directly. Instead, it expands the picture. It shows that different communities carry the same story in different ways, shaped by geography, tradition, and time. In the end, the Ethiopian Bible invites a simple reflection. History is not always preserved by those with the loudest voices or the greatest power. Sometimes, it survives because a small community chooses to remember carefully, protect faithfully, and pass things on unchanged. And sometimes, those quiet traditions still have something new to show us if we take the time to look.